איבדתי את אחד המנהיגים הגדולים ביותר שהכרתי בחיי.
אז מה קורה אצלכם בדרום? ואני אומרת לה, עשו לנו יום כיפורים.
אנחנו חייבים משהו לאחז בו, תקווה, קרן אור.
שנה באוקטובר, סיפורים מקומיים בימי מלחמה, מבית מתנ"ס שער הנגב.
שלום לכולם, איזה כיף שוב להיות פה. אני מאיה יפרח, מנהלת את קשרי החוץ ופיתוח המשאבים בשער הנגב, וגם היום הפרק שנקליט יהיה באנגלית. יש לי אורח מיוחד שהגיע לארץ, הגיע לבקר אותנו בשער הנגב, וזאת הזדמנות מצוינת קצת לשמוע על החברים שלנו, השותפים שלנו מעבר לים. So I'm sitting here with Ingram. Very excited to be here with you today.
Likewise.
Ingram is a board member of the Jewish Federation of San Diego, our 26-year-old friends, partners abroad. A great friend of Sha'ar HaNegev. You have been here numerous times. I don't know if it's something that you can even count. You have a lot of friends here, so every time you come to Sha'ar HaNegev, you're a very busy man, and we make sure that you see as much as possible and meet as many people as possible. Of course, you knew Ophir, and you're very well connected to a lot of people here in Sha'ar HaNegev who work in the council. If you could just share, first of all, who you are for our listeners.
Of course, it'd be a pleasure. So first of all, Maia, it's great to be here. There's a part of me that when I leave Sha'ar HaNegev is left behind, and it's always reclaimed when I come back. But yes, so who I am is, as you can probably hear from my accent, you know, I'm not Israeli, I'm not American. I always joke to friends and colleagues that, can't you tell from my accent, I'm from Texas or Alabama, but that of course is also not true. I'm actually from the United Kingdom, born in London. Raised in a small town about 60 miles south of London called Brighton, which had a community of 10,000 Jews when I was there, now down to about 3,000 or 4,000, but a great community and something that we'll perhaps touch on a little later on. Emigrated to the United States in 1994. Originally, it was supposed to be for 2 years. That was 31 years ago. And, you know, we established ourselves professionally in the US. Over the course of the last 30 or so years, got increasingly involved in Jewish community activities through the San Diego Jewish Academy, through the Federation, through AIPAC, through a variety of different other Jewish organizations, ADL, AJC, and through the course of involvement with all of those, became increasingly aware of and increasingly connected to this wonderful community here in Sha'ar HaNegev. And, you know, over the course of time, that relationship has just become stronger and stronger and stronger. And I know that we'll talk a little bit about that later, but that's who I am. And that at a high level is how I'm connected to this amazing community.
So definitely a very strong connection to Israel and the Jewish people and your heritage. Why Sha'ar HaNegev? You know, San Diego is so far away from where we are right now. Physically, not spiritually or emotionally, but why Sha'ar HaNegev from all places? You know,
that's a great question. And, you know, when I first came to Israel in 1978 as a volunteer on a kibbutz up north, I think the furthest south we actually got was maybe Tel Aviv. The community of Sha'ar HaNegev and the community of San Diego has, as you just said, been connected in one way or another for 26 years. My connection with San Diego began in about 2007, 2008, during the Maccabi Games in San Diego, when 2 kids from Sha'ar HaNegev were assigned to the soccer team that I was coaching. They were part of the San Diego soccer team. That was where my personal connection began. My son's connection, my family's connection began as they were doing joint trips with the San Diego Jewish Academy, exchange trips.
Teen exchanges. Which we're still doing till this day.
Now, interesting. So that's where the connection began and became strong. And to be fair, over the course of the 26 years, it hasn't been a linear relationship where the relationship has just got stronger and stronger and stronger. year over year, it really depended upon the people that were involved in driving that community partnership. At the very beginning, a gentleman by the name of Larry Ashertel, who I think is still very much involved, was the main driver with, I think, one of the former mayors of Sha'ar HaNegev, Alon Schuster. It was the person-to-person warmth and connection that ultimately drove that relationship throughout their various communities. The highlight, of course, was the community federation trip in May of 2023, where we had almost 300 people from San Diego visit individual members of the Sha'ar HaNegev community.
Where were you? Do you remember?
I was actually on Kibbutz Erez. I was with Ziv and Yahel, who have become very great friends and who I had dinner with last night. And that's really a microcosm for the person-to-person interaction and connection and love and warmth and friendship that has grown over the course of time, dramatically reinforced in May of 2023. This was the basis of my connection, which is obviously part of the community's connection with Sha'ar HaNegev, which established obviously the platform for the relationship that has obviously gone on to an entirely new level, a new plane since October the 7th. So it's a community which is, you can see all around the links between Sha'ar HaNegev and San Diego, whether it's on buildings, but primarily through the people-to-people connection.
The relationships.
Absolutely.
And that's what we keep saying when we talk about people-to-people. It's the teen exchange programs that have been happening for a very long time and how important that was. And that visit, that was just phenomenal. It was such a celebration. And I think that really set the scene for a lot of people in San Diego on October 7th, tuning into the TV and just feeling like that's their family. They know the people personally. There was a personal connection there. It wasn't something far or remote about it. It was just, And
there was one, if I may, there was one particular moment, right, on that trip, which has remained uppermost in the minds of so many San Diegans that came on that trip. And that was when we got off the train at Sderot to be met by tens of beautiful flag-waving children saying, welcome to Sha'ar HaNegev, to our friends in San Diego. That image has been firmly imprinted in the minds of so many as a metaphor, if you like, for the beautiful relationship that exists between our two communities.
Yes, the beautiful children of Keshet, the elementary school, were there. They were so excited. And yes, that's definitely a defining moment. I remember that vividly. I know this is a very hard connection to make, but we are, this podcast is about a year of October. And I would like for you to share either a personal experience, what it was for you on that day.
My connection with what ultimately became, the biggest tragedy to befall the Jewish people since the end of the Second World War, it took me back to October 73. And I'll share with you why. I can remember exactly where I was on the 6th of October, 1973. It was actually Yom Kippur, and, my late grandmother, she won't be aware of this, but, I was eating lunch, right, as I was as a 12-year-old boy, watching the sport. And the news flash came in that Israel had been attacked. And it immediately took me back to that moment. And it immediately took me back to the connection that I felt with my young peers and the disconnect that I had with my non-Jewish peers, who, when I returned to school on that Monday morning, people were talking about the conflict. And it's like, I can still remember, and I can see in my mind's eye one boy saying to me, I hope the Syrians smash the Israelis to bits. Applause throughout the classroom. And I felt the same. It took me back. On October the 7th, 2023, I immediately went back in my mind to those moments. Again, a metaphor, if you like, for the way that the Jewish people came together and the rest of the world, many of whom we had thought of allies, abandoned us.
If I may, we here in Israel living in this very intense reality, we tend to look at ourselves and this huge tragedy that happened here. But I think on October 7th, and that's what you're saying in a way, it was a Jewish tragedy. It wasn't an attack on the envelope or Sha'ar HaNegev or Israel. It was a direct attack on the Jewish people wherever they are. And that was the leading feeling, if I understand correctly.
That's absolutely correct. And, you know, when we first came here, as you know, I mean, I've been back, this is another fourth time I've been here since October the 7th. The first trip was about 5 to 6 weeks after October the 7th. The country was still in shock, still traumatized by the events. I can just remember getting into a taxi driver and the taxi driver hugging me saying, "Thank you for coming. Why are you here?" So my sense was, and I don't know what it was like before October the 7th, you know, there was potentially a disconnect between Israel and the diaspora in so many different areas. But my sense was, you know, certainly amongst Israelis who were grateful that we were here, who were grateful that we were, you know, giving our brothers and sisters in Israel hugs because that's what they wanted more than anything else at that time. My sense was that Israelis who perhaps had not yet fully appreciated the extent to which the diaspora felt as connected as they did, I think that was a defining moment in many, many ways. And one which I believe was probably necessary, although obviously the tragedy which led to it was terrible. But we came together, you know, as Jews have done throughout history. We came together, and we have to take care of ourselves. You know, Kol Yisrael, Aravim Ze Bazeh. That's what it became all about for me, for our community in San Diego, as you've correctly said. 5,000 people immediately got together 2 days after the tragedy, you know, for a vigil in support of our brothers and sisters in Sha'ar HaNegev. You know, the community has remained solidly behind our friends, our family.
You know, not everybody was able to feel that strong connection. And so I'm very happy that you are here today to articulate it, because it is so important. I think the leading feeling those days were loneliness, distrust, and having San Diego show its support and other communities from all around the world. And maybe you want to share about, you know, the communities in the UK. I think you have that perspective as well, and we don't hear about that enough, or don't know enough about that. But that's something that I personally felt, as you know, being doing what I do, is just feeling immense support and love, and was so important to see you. And I know that when you came early as November, you had the opportunity to meet several people. One of them was Mandy, Emily's mother. I would love for you to share a little bit about that experience and what it did, the ripples of that meeting.
We actually came November 2023, and as I said before, country was in deep shock, physical shock, emotional shock. We went to Kfar Aza, which was still basically off limits. It's the first time in my entire life that I've had to put on protective military equipment, which, you know, again, you know, the admiration that you have for the soldiers and the IDF is just extraordinary. And as we were touring the devastation, as we were touring the young people's area, which bore the brunt of the early attacks, some of the horrific attacks and kidnapping, we almost literally bumped into Doron's mother, who was there for literally no more than half an hour, picking up some personal belongings.
Right.
And we chatted to her. So it was an impromptu discussion. And I still have the evidence of the meeting on my camera, where we were just chatting and she was begging us to do whatever we could in the communities from which we came, in order to do whatever we could to bring Doron and all the other remaining hostages home. And I will still remember what she said. She is not a mother. She doesn't have a baby, but she's my baby. And that resonated with me. And then, as you said, we also, on our next visit, we actually met Mandy, which was more of an arranged visit, where Mandy was sharing some of the details about Emily's life, and, you know, effectively the same thing as all the hostage families have been doing, keeping the awareness uppermost in the consciousness streams of anybody who's here, of anybody who has any kind of influence. And with Mandy and Doron's mum, we took the images home with us, and my own personal dinner table thereafter, until both young women were released, had pictures of Doron and Emily sitting side by side with the rest of us. They were there at our Shabbat dinner tables. They were there at Pesach. And, you know, every Shabbat we said a prayer for the hostages, and specifically ones for Emily and Doron, whose moms we had met and with whom we had formed a relationship. So it became very personal, as it did for so many in our community who have friends and relatives who are deeply connected to some of the families that have suffered such tragedy, some of whom have been kidnapped. And there's another community. You mentioned the communities, the connections in the UK. Sachi Idan, of blessed memory, whose body was returned to Israel a week ago, who was buried a week ago. In my community of Brighton, a small community where there are 3,000 or 4,000 Jews remaining, Sachi Idan's first cousin lives, Adam Manit. Heidi Brachram is his wonderful wife, who together, every day since October the 30th of 2023, have said Kaddish for one of the 1,200 plus victims that died in the attacks of October the 7th. And this is in a small area of Brighton and Hove, a small community 60 miles south of London. And every day there is a group of people that says Kaddish in front of this memorial for one of the victims, and they read out eulogies of one of the victims. And I had the honor of reading out a eulogy for Ophir when I was last there in December. So, you know, we have this interconnected world that has become much stronger since October the 7th, all around the world. And I think that we have a responsibility as Jews, whether we're in the diaspora or whether we're in Israel, to ensure that the bonds of friendship and community that were so firmly reestablished or strengthened after October the 7th remain, specifically here for Sha'ar HaNegev, as we look to rebuild the community and help you guys rebuild the community.
Definitely. I think we have a role in that. So I promise to do my best, and I know you will. And you mentioned the very strong bond between Israelis and Jews all over the world. And kind of going back to what you said, that on October 7th, that took you back to 1973 and children cheering against Israel. What was the response in the community in the US or in the UK? What have you experienced outside of your personal community? And how have you been working through that or dealing with that? I know that we have our struggles, but also you are facing a very complex situation.
You know, my immediate reaction when you asked the question, you know, what did we experience? And this is a generalization. And obviously, I think one has to distinguish between the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, where there was just shock and horror at just the absolute depravity and barbarity, the savagery of the attacks, where I think people were shocked and somewhat sympathetic. Pretty soon after, that morphed into silence, contextualizing, excusing, to a point whereby it was not soon after where people were on the streets chanting from the river to the sea. And we all know what that means. Or worse, invoking the most hideous images of the Holocaust, characterizing Jews and Israelis in ways that it's just hard to imagine. The biggest disappointment for me has been, disappointment, not entirely surprised, but still very disappointed, has been the abandoning of the Jewish community by people who we had previously thought of as allies, people that we had supported in their fight for civil rights, social justice. That's been the biggest disappointment from me, both personally and professionally. It's hard when people who you have considered as your friends, even some family members, distant family members, are very quick to follow the trends on TikTok and post all eyes on Rafah. And yet when the Bibas families' bodies get returned and the absolute horror of the manner of their death is known worldwide, silence. That is something that I will never forget. That has been life-changing for me.
Deafening silence.
And it is, unfortunately, one of the more horrifying memories and echoes of what our ancestors have obviously had to put up in the past, put up with in the past. But that's been the prevailing underlying sentiment that I've experienced from outside of, the Jewish community. And that's been incredibly disappointing.
I want to say I can't imagine, but I can imagine. I think we share that as well. And that's why these conversations like this one right now is so important, to remind ourselves of this deep connection that I have with you, that other people have with other residents of San Diego, the two communities, Federation and Sha'ar HaNegev, Israel and the U.S., and, et cetera, et cetera. And I would love to hear, in your view, what is the significance of this international partnership between us? Why does it matter so much?
Well, I think we've kind of touched upon that, haven't we? It's that for some reason, even though we are oceans apart, when were we expelled from, my history lesson is not particularly good. What was it, 70 AD? We were expelled from this beautiful land, scattered to all parts of the world, and yet somehow connected to each other through a shared desire to return. And that's what I don't think people necessarily understand that. And that's something that we as a community, I think, have to do a much better job of explaining. Why is it that people of different ethnicities and races and cultures remain connected through this medium of ritual, connection to a land and so on? And I think that we've got to do a better job of explaining what Judaism is to people, because Judaism isn't just a religion. I have many friends who consider themselves atheists, and yet they're Jews, because they connect to something that's broader than just liturgy or text.
It's the shared values.
It's the shared values. It's shared customs. It's a shared history. It's shared trauma, if we're honest about it. So that's where it comes from. It comes from the soul. It comes from the heart. I never understood it as a kid until I was the sixth candle in a play that was written by my rabbi's wife. And the candles represented a segment of Jewish history. Okay, I can't remember what the shamus was. It was at the beginning of time or whatever it was. And And the rabbi's wife, again of blessed memory, who was exceptionally talented, wrote a long poem which dealt with each aspect of each segments of Jewish history, starting with the Bible and then moving on in poetry, beautiful poetry. I wish I had the poem. I can't remember it, and I don't know where it is. I was the sixth candle. The sixth candle was about the Holocaust. And I can remember during rehearsals, I was repeating whatever she asked me to repeat, and she told me to raise my voice in a kind of crescendo when I started to mention the names of the concentration camps. And so I still remember the 3 concentration camps that she asked me to say. The first was Treblinka, and she said, whisper it. So I went Treblinka. The second was Belsen, raise it a little bit. The third was Auschwitz, and she said, you have to shout it. I was 12 years old. I had a broad understanding, I'm sure, of the Second World War and the impact of the Holocaust. But when I shouted it during the Hanukkah service, I saw people in the audience crying. And then I realized that this is something bigger than just the people that were in this room. This is bigger than the poetry that she's asked me to read. Ultimately, we are connected through many, many different things. We feel for each other. It's a shared value system, and we have a connection to the land of Israel. I'm not sure that you can be a Jew in the 21st century, or even before, or certainly not after, unless you are a proud Zionist. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with everything that everybody does or what the Israeli government is doing, but you have to believe that this is our homeland. And ultimately, that's, the connection, I think, that all Jewish people have, certainly if they consider themselves proud Jews, proud Zionists. That's the connection. That's why the partnership was able to draw on each other when it came to October the 7th. And that hopefully will be the basis upon which the partnership is able to thrive and grow going forward.
Definitely. And it's just chilling what you were saying about that poem and about that play. I could not. I'm just imagining what we would whisper today.
And it's part of the long line of
what 3 communities would we mention, or 3 atrocities, or
the scale of it is what is obviously so shocking. But Jews have been massacred, whether it's in Hebron in 1929 or in other parts of the Middle East, or whether it's the pogroms in Europe. It's been going on for forever, which again is one of the most important reasons as to why Israel has to exist as the homeland for the Jewish people. I think what we've learnt, despite the many friends that we have around the world, what we've learnt is that we have to take care of ourselves. Because when we've not been strong as a people, when we've not had Israel, notwithstanding some of the failures, obviously the security failures of October the 7th, a weak Jewish people and a weak Israel is not good for the Jews all over the world.
We spoke a lot about the emotional, spiritual connection between the 2 communities, and, our shared bond of understanding that this is our home. And I want to kind of share, and I know you know this because you've been with us every step of the way, share with our listeners how San Diego Federation was involved, obviously long before October 7th, but since October 7th, from that very day. And this is something we spoke about when I talked to Heidi. She was the 3rd person to hear about Ophir's death, how involved San Diego has been here since October 7th. And just kind of, I know this is it's important for me to have the listeners hear this list, which is unparalleled. So San Diego in the very beginning sent funds out of the emergency fund that you raised. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that, but basic and necessities and supplies like clothing and shoes, laundry machines, learning materials, computers, tablets, heating appliances that we sent to the hotels, furniture, closets, toys, medical supplies, educational kits, tents, gazebos, operation vehicles, logistics. I mean, you helped us with basic logistics like completion of the sheltered operation center in the council, equipping the emergency teams, sending us generators and fuel, construction of outdoor classrooms, also support in activities within the community, recreational activities for the children at risk, youth at risk, field trip, transportation to the evacuation sites, activities for the elderly from Yachdav, women retreats, rented vehicles for our residents to haul their belongings, community cultural events, operating clubs in the evacuation centers. Of course, there was immense support with mental health and trauma, the ongoing psychological support services that we were able to provide, individual and group therapy, specialized support for groups and families, alternative therapy. We offered so many different, array of therapy, and you were there holding our hand all through that emergency response squads that received treatments with funds that you sent. Recruiting therapy teams. God knows we needed so much more personnel in education teams, social education. Really, and the list goes on and on. This is unbelievable, Ingram. I mean, I could go forever, and I am not even talking about the big, big projects.
It's we talk about the importance of person-to-person contact, the relationships, the emotional support, which we were able to give you and continue to give you since October the 7th. But let's be realistic. That's wonderful. It's needed. But when somebody needs a washing machine, or when the kids, after they'd been evacuated to Mitzpeh Ramon, need classrooms refurbished, whether it's the Women's Resilience Center, whether it's the community pubs all across Sha'ar HaNegev, and I think that they have been funded by community grants that were given out to the entire community. This is what counts. Yes, the emotional support, the psychological support that we're able to give you from afar, it's needed. Let's not kid ourselves. We need each other. But these things cost. And it's wonderful to see how, our community in San Diego, and quite frankly, communities all around the United States and around the world, have stepped up to be able to provide these essential services in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th. But really important that we ensure that projects that contribute towards the viability and sustainability of the communities within the entire region, that's where it's going to count. Our wonderful friend Lior, who came to San Diego with you a few months ago, inspired us all in San Diego with, I think it was Vision 2028. And, this is
Close
who we
your
are.
eyes and imagine.
Close your eyes and imagine. 2028. We were at Kfar Aza this morning, as we were at Kfar Aza in November of 2023. And again, if there's one community that will be a metaphor for the regrowth and rebirth of this entire region, it will be when people who want to return to Kfar Aza can do so in the visionary and aspirational manner that would Ophir of blessed memory would have envisioned. And I think that was clearly what Lior had in mind. So, but these things require us as a community to continue to help and support some of the projects that you've just talked about, and with new projects such as the Beit Melacha, I believe in honor of Livnat Kurtz, whose vision this was, and who I believe we were involved in supporting many years back. Again, to be able to contribute towards the rebuilding, the refurbishment, the recreation of a creative and arts and therapy center that will be available to the entire community. These are the kind of projects that we have to continue to support. So, the people to people, I mean, the two aspects of this partnership, the relationships, the people to people and the physical rebuilding, they're interconnected. One doesn't happen without the other. And this is something to which, I and my fellow board members in San Diego are 100% committed to. But again, it's very, very important that the needs of the community are driven by the community. It's not something that, we're coming in or anybody's coming in and saying, you need this, that, and the other. That doesn't work. We're here as your partners. You're the ones that are living here on the ground. You guys know what you need. We're there to support you, both emotionally, physically, and philanthropically, as we move forward to rebuild this incredible region.
So thank you. You, Federation, with the leadership of Heidi and the wonderful board members and the people behind and the wonderful donors have been allowing us to do so much here in Sha'ar HaNegev. And as you mentioned, Lior and Yossi, that was the acting mayor, and now we have new leadership. I believe it's possible. Together, it's possible. And if I haven't said it enough, I will say it now. Thank you. And I want you to take that message back with you and put it in your pocket and spread it out. And, but I would, to wrap up, if you could send one message to the people of Sha'ar HaNegev, you have a platform.
Okay.
What would that message be?
Well, I thought about, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually, in the last couple of weeks or so, having the opportunity to connect with, people that a much wider community group than we would ordinarily have access to, which this podcast obviously provides. And there's a song, and I'm not going to sing, but there's a song that I believe was written during COVID, where a whole group of Israeli artists got together and they sang a song, and it was inspirational. It's funny, we had a whole group of Shinshinim over at our house a year ago, and I started singing it for them, and then they all joined in, and it was wonderful. But the chorus, I am going to, out of respect to the listeners, I'm going to read it in Hebrew, and then I'm going to read it in English. But I think it actually summarizes the message of community and partnership that I think this has been all about. So forgive my Hebrew. It's Kamo shechaya kacha yeh, avanu hakol na'aver gam et zeh. Lo yiplu panenu zekatan aleinu. And I think that's the message. And it reads in English, as it was, so it will be again. We survived it all. We will survive this also. We will not fail. We got this. And together, we got this.
I agree. We got this. Thank you, Ingram. Toda Rabba for coming to Sha'ar HaNegev, doing this wonderful episode and just sharing your thoughts with us and being such a good friend, So thank you.
It's a pleasure, Maia. Thank you for being such a good friend to us. And it's important for everybody to know very quickly that, this is important. This is as important. We get as much out of this as you do, because it allows us to have that connection that we talked about earlier on to, people of this wonderful region in this wonderful country. And, I send love and blessings to all of our friends and to all of the wonderful people in Sha'ar HaNegev.
תודה, ותודה לכם שהאזנתם. יש לנו באמת קהילה מדהימה שתומכת בנו, וזו זכות מאוד גדולה. אז אנחנו מסיימים פה את הפרק הזה. להתראות עד הפעם הבאה.